let's talk about the prominent LDS women who presented as modern and monogamous in the early 20th century, but who were actually secret polygamists. People often point out the great irony that the Mormon polygamous women of the 19th century and the 1870s and 1880s who fought for the right to vote were also simultaneously defending polygamy. But that dynamic, merging those two worlds, women's rights and polygamy, lasted a lot longer than many assume, and it included a lot more people than we typically think about. This video is based on a brand new article in the latest issue of the Journal of Mormon History. It's by Andrea Radke Moss, and she delivered it as her presidential address to the MHA last year in June. It's titled, Monogamy on Display, Plurality Behind the Curtain. Emily S. Richards, Mary Booth Talmage, Susa Young Gates, Posthumous Sealings, and the Politics of Marital Representation at the 1893 World's Congress of Representatives Women. And yes, I know it is a very long title that uses up nearly all the words before actually getting there, but it's a fascinating article, as you'll see. So in this video, I want to do a few things. One is I'll summarize some of the key takeaways of this article and why it's worth reading. Then I'm going to talk to Dr. Radke Moss about it, how she came to study it, what lessons she learned, and then finally, she and I are going to talk about the Mormon History Association, where she delivered this address. Because right now, the registration is open for the Mormon History Association's annual conference taking place this June in Las Vegas, the first weekend in June. And I strongly encourage you, if you are interested in this channel, I promise you, you will be interested in this conference. It will be a smorgasbord of lots of fascinating papers to attend and people to meet and new lessons to learn. And if you stay to the end of this video, I will tease you with the title of my presidential address. I'm currently privileged to serve as president of MHA, which is why I have the presidential seer stone back here with the googly eyes that my daughter added, because we in this household believe that seer stones should be able to see you back. And so I'll tell you what the topic of my presidential address will be, but I promise you it probably won't be as fascinating as Dr. Radke Moss. So let's dig into it. There's a common, fascinating, and well-told story of how Mormon women simultaneously embraced polygamy in the 1870s and 1880s and were also at the forefront of women's rights, and how Utah received the right to vote earlier than nearly every other state and territory, in part because the broader world believed that women would then overturn the patriarchy, that was the best way to end polygamy. But that right to vote for the Mormon women was later revoked in the 1880s when congressmen decided that it was just another vote that the polygamists, the patriarchs, were able to control, and women's suffrage was not restored until Utah received statehood in 1896 and then actual statehood in 1897. Getting less attention in this fascinating story, but still important, is the next generation of Mormon women leaders who, at least outwardly, presented as monogamous and modern, and therefore willing to assimilate into American culture. These women are often depicted as craving monogamy and breaking away from past generations. They served a crucial role, both for the church because it gave them a much more modern face, someone that the wider society could embrace, but it was also embraced by the suffragist movement and the women's rights activists because they're like, it's so much easier to support you than it is to support the polygamists, because it did not mean they have to tacitly agree to polygamy. But in comes Dr. Radke Moss and her brand new article digging into the background of many of these prominent women, especially Richards, Talmage, and Gates. Because she found, digging into their lives and temple records and sealings and private diaries, that most of them were secretly sealed to plural spouses. Let me read an extended quote that kind of summarizes this finding. These women represented a highly important status in both the pre-manifesto and post-manifesto eras for outward-facing representation. Women who visibly and consciously rejected plurality for the purpose of public image, social acceptance, and worldly status, but in secret still embraced it. This study of 3 high-profile monogamous couples in the church who practiced posthumous polygamous sealings did so for varying purposes, including doctrinal adherence to celestial marriage, family and community connections, salvific concern for vulnerable women, and creating eternal kinship with women of importance. There's so many fascinating details in this article that are surprised, that especially these connections between these monogamous, outwardly facing monogamous families and the women they're sealed to. Perhaps most fascinating is the story of James Talmage and his wife, May Booth. Now, James Talmage was a professor at what was then Brigham Young Academy in the 1880s, which is where he met May Booth, one of the students. He also met one of May's fellow students, a woman by the name of Zella Webb, who tragically burned in a bedroom explosion in 1887, then suffered for a year, where Talmage often supported her as the professor before she died a year later. And then after James Talmage and May Booth were wed a couple years after that, they were sealed to Zella as a plural spouse. And what's fascinating is that then process was repeated a few years later when they're sealed to another one of May's former fellow classmates and Talmage's former students, Grace Mayhew, another Brigham Young Academy student who had died at a young age. You also have stories like Susa Young Gates, a daughter of Brigham Young, who really outwardly strongly embraced monogamy, and yet secretly she added what Dr. Radke Moss lovingly calls trophy wives, being sealed to these prominent women's activists, or at least family members of these prominent activists. So like I said, the story is very fascinating, but it also points to some central tensions, especially the contradictions and struggles at the heart of Mormons on the verge of giving up polygamy, which they had considered a core doctrine. Before I go much further, just a reminder that if you enjoy this type of nerdy content, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. I do deep dives every Monday, I connect the past to the present every Wednesday, and I pull back the curtains on the historian's craft every Friday, like with this video where I talk about with authors of new books and articles and peel back the sources behind their arguments. And if you want to give back to this channel, and I'm so grateful for the many of you who have given back, you can become a member, where for a nominal fee, you can get early access to the videos, you get little icons next to your names, and most importantly, you know you're supporting public-facing scholarship. I also encourage you to subscribe to my free Kit newsletter, as well as my social media channels, especially TikTok and Instagram, where I do supplementary materials. Links to all of those you'll find in the video description. And in this channel, I'm also going to strongly encourage you to become a member of the Mormon History Association. As I said, if you enjoy this type of content, you will love the Mormon History Association, regardless of your religious background, regardless of your current affiliation with any denomination, regardless of your level of skill. If you enjoy learning about history, you can spend the weekend with 600 other people who enjoy Mormon history, coming from diverse backgrounds, just really interested in learning about Mormonism's past. And I'll link to the registration page for the website or for the conference in the video description. Dr. Radke Moss is professor of history at Brigham Young University of Idaho, where she teaches courses on U.S. women's history as well as the American West. She received her PhD from the University of Nebraska, and she wrote a well-received book titled Bright Epochs: Women and Coeducation in the American West. She has several award-winning articles, including the first article that persuasively argued that Eliza R. Snow was likely raped during the Mormon-Missouri conflict. A fascinating and sobering topic that lots of people shied away from. Now, Dr. Radke Moss was elected president of the Mormon History Association, where she served last year, and she delivered this paper as her presidential address, the culminating session of the entire weekend, and that address just published in the Journal of Mormon History. You get access to the journal if you are a member of the Mormon History Association. So with all that background, let's talk to Dr. Radke Moss. Now, welcome, Dr. Andrea Radke Moss, coming to us from the frozen tundra of Rexburg, although I hear it hasn't been that cold this last winter, right?
Nope, no winter at all.
All right, there must be something in the climate. I don't know. So, Dr. Radke Moss, why don't you tell us why you chose such a fascinating topic that I'm pretty sure most people haven't considered before?
That's a great question. It all started with my research on the Chicago World's Fair, and historians, myself and Reed Nielsen, we tended, and my research had always lumped all of the women who went to the Chicago World's Fair together, just Mormon women. When I broke it down into the two different meetings of the Congress of Representative Women, one meeting in the morning was for the Relief Society, the meeting in the evening was for the Young Women's Mutual Improvement Association, I'm noticing a difference. I'm like, wait a second. Most of these women are polygamists in the Relief Society, and they're all older, and mostly older. And most of the women in the Young Women's Association were younger and mostly either single or monogamous, except, of course, for Elmina Taylor, who was the president of the Young Women's, and she was a polygamist. And I thought, there's something weird there. There's like the generational difference between the two organizations. So that's kind of how it started. And then I started to look into biographies of some of the monogamous or the single women, but particularly the monogamous women. And it just accidentally happened. As I got into biographies of Franklin, of Emily S. Richards in particular, because she's kind of my key figure that I study for all of my suffrage activism and Mormon women's stuff. I got in touch through David Grua, and he put me in touch with a family member who then gave me a whole bunch of family history documents associated with Franklin and Emily. And one of the documents just happened to mention that Franklin was sealed to these deceased women. And I kind of went, what? Yeah, really? Because they were so famously monogamous. And I'm thinking, why are they sealed to these deceased women? So all I had names. I had names of women, and I had references from these family history documents. And you know what family history documents are like. They're sometimes kind of like a Mod Podge and kind of crazy. And I kind of sat on this for months and even years. I'm thinking, I've got these names. I would go into Family Search, as one does, and I would look to see who all is connected. And sometimes, you know how Family Search is, like sometimes things will appear and then they'll disappear, and then they'll appear again and they'll disappear. Yeah. And so sometimes I would see these names pop up in the Franklin and Emily Richards coupling, and I would see that Franklin would be sealed to these other women, but then maybe one of the women would disappear or something like that. So I thought I'd check out a lot of these women. So I started plugging in names into Family Search. And that's where about 10, 11 years ago, I think, I accidentally landed on Susa Young Gates.
and I just plugged her trophy wives, trophy wives, as you call them.
Her trophy wives. I plugged in Susa Young Gates into Family Search. And for a moment, and I looked at Jacob, and Jacob for a moment, and almost like it went bump, bump. Like I looked at it, and then a day later I looked at it again and it was gone. You know how it is.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, I know I saw that. I know I saw that Jacob was sealed to somebody. And the person that I saw was Rachel Foster Avery. And it just appeared, and then when I went back, it was gone. And I'm thinking, well, what in the heck is going on here with all these sealings? And so I hung on to that one for a while, and I'm thinking, Jacob Gates was sealed to Rachel Foster Avery? Why?
Who is a prominent activist.
For those of you listening that aren't familiar with her, prominent, like the corresponding secretary of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. She was literally Susan B. Anthony's mentee. She was her protege.
And notably not a Mormon.
And notably, like overwhelmingly not a Mormon. When she finally did get married, she met her husband, through suffrage circles, and he was, just really great feminist ally. And they even invited a minister to seal them, like a male and female minister, a la like back to Lucretia Mott, to marry them, to take out the whole obey, all that stuff. And I'm thinking, why is Jacob Gates sealed? So that's where it started. It started with me exploring this different dynamic between the polygamous wives of the Relief Society and the monogamous wives of the Young Women's Association that are arguably a second, like a lower generation, younger generation, and then accidentally happening upon these famous monogamous couples and seeing these little hints of sealings to dead women. So that's how it started.
And by the way, speaking to you, Hulu, if you're looking for a new Mormon-themed series, please do a dramatic series on the family search wars, because I think that that'll have all the drama and excitement that we might be missing with the loss of certain characters going forward.
Right.
All right. So now, Andrea, I'm going to ask you the question that I know you dream of getting asked in every public setting for the last couple decades, which is, tell us why this 1893 World's Fair is important.
Well, it's the first, I mean, there's a lot of World's Fairs from the 1850s through the 1920s. This was the first one that was a large American fair that the church had prominent representation at. Now, the 1876 Philadelphia Fair, there'd been minor, like the church had sort of flirted with it. Some of the Relief Society leaders went to the 1876 fair, but not like this one. And in my article in my upcoming book, I talk about how it's midpoint. It's right in the middle between the manifesto. So the manifesto is 1890. And then statehood for Utah is 1896, which grants women the right to vote in the state constitution. And so I put it as like this transitional point, which I think works. And in the 5 to 6 years before that, the Relief Society and young women leaders had been reaching out to national suffrage leaders, had been making those relationships. They'd been admitted into the International Council of Women and the National Council of Women. They have a presence, they have a relationship. National suffrage leaders have been to Utah. They know who they are. Utah women have been back east. They've been to various women's rights conventions and NCW meetings in Washington, D.C. and New York and other places. So those relationships had grown. 1893 was a big deal for Mormon women because it was this Congress of Representative Women that was organized by the International Council of Women, basically this massive catch-all conference of women for not just America, but the whole globe. And the leaders, Mayrite Sewell and others, just do this blanket invitation. Everybody who has anything to say about women's rights, come to Chicago. And Mormon women get an invite. It's a big deal. It's kind of a big deal because they'd only been kind of accepted into national suffrage circles within like the previous 3 to 4 years. And now they're getting their actual own panel at this Congress. Mm-hmm. And so that's mainly what I talk about was this week in May before the fair, before the Chicago World's Fair actually technically opened. It's these congresses beforehand that are the big deal. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of these women who are involved, representing this new generation of Mormon women, presenting as modern and monogamous to the world, a new type of the Mormon woman like Emily Richards, Mary Talmage, and Susa Young Gates. Right. What is it about them that allows the church to put on a new face, at least publicly?
Well, one is that they're all, I'm going to talk about their personality characteristics in general. They're all vibrant. They're somewhat educated. They're well-read and well-spoken. They're all, for the most part, suffrage activists. I would say Mae Booth Talmage was. Hers was a little bit less kind of overt than Emily and Susa. But they're all monogamous. They're all married to only one man. And that it's across all of them. And then there's a whole bunch of single women who haven't been married yet. Yeah. Who are daughters of polygamists, but they themselves. But these women in particular, they are consciously suffrage activists. They've already been kind of embraced in this national suffrage connections, but they're all monogamous. Yeah.
So at least publicly, because now through your digging and through these family histories, many, if not most of them, are sealed to secret plural wives. Either these connections or these widows who died decades before, or in the case of Mae Booth and Mae Booth Talmage and James Talmage, some of Mae's fellow students at Brigham Young Academy when Talmage was a professor, or in the case of Susa Young Gates, just these prominent trophy wives. So okay, unpack that for me.
It's really, one thing that they do all have in common is that a lot of these sealings are happening during the underground period, during the prosecution and the anti-polygamy persecution. So the 1880s and early 1890s is when this stuff is happening. So I was trying to make a connection that somehow the church being under scrutiny for the practice of polygamy. Everyone's in the underground. Heck, the entire leadership of the church is in the underground. Is there a way that they're trying to, are they purposely doing this to make a statement? Is there their way of trying to make a commitment to the theology of plural marriage behind the scenes? Because even though we're under assault, we're still going to do it. I'm not sure. We don't really have, what I wasn't able to find, except from James E. Talmage, was why we're doing this. Yeah. I get nothing from Franklin and Emily, and that's partly because they burned all of their letters, and I'm still mad at them for that. And Susa never says anything about it. Like I still have yet to uncover when Susa and Rachel had a conversation where Susa said, you know, if you ever die, would you like to be sealed to my husband in a church that you don't even belong to? You know, when did this conversation happen?
Yeah. You person who went out of her way to find a marriage ceremony that decolonized the patriarchal structure. How about you get sealed into my patriarchal polygamous family?
How would you like to do the exact opposite of what you, I mean, it's just funny. It's funny. I would love to, oh, man. And there's so much behind,
And by the way, those of you who have watched my interview with Nate Oman about his new book on Mormons and law, and you might remember Franklin Richards as the key lawyer that kind of begrudgingly drags Mormonism into the modern world. It's that same guy married to Emily Richards. Like, they both have a very public persona, while privately, secretly being sealed to these plural wives, giving the public image and the secret polygamy. So my final major question on this great article, Andrea, is, what does this then tell us about the lingering questions and wrestling with polygamy and Mormonism dragging into the 20th century?
Well, that's a great question. And I end my article basically with questions. If you read my article, it's like a whole paragraph of why this and why this, because I still, first of all, I don't know when it started. Yeah. We know that, of course, polygamous men were sealing to dead women all the time. We know that Wilford Woodruff was sealed to hundreds of dead women. This is not a surprise, people. This is not like, you know, there's a conscious attempt as the church is coming out of this anti-polygamy legislation prosecution that they are putting forth people like couples like the Caines, John and Margaret Cain, or Franklin and Emily Richards. They're consciously doing that on purpose so that they can gain that acceptance, that widespread acceptance. Why do you even need to continue practicing polygamy? Why are some people still doing it if you can get away with just wait till people die?
Yeah.
Just wait till people die and then seal everybody together. Right. I mean, what's the point? I end with so many questions of, what's the point of doing this if you can get away with the letter of the law by just sealing dead people? I don't know when it began. I don't know when it becomes widely practiced, but I find it interesting that it shows up in these three major ways from women that are these overt kind of Relief Society young women leaderships who are monogamous. They are, and they talk about it. I mean, you read my quotes where Franklin Richards is writing to senators. Senators are writing to him and they're like, we love you and your wife because we know you're monogamous. And Susa Young Gates goes to these meetings and the suffrage leaders are like, well, we hate the fact that your last name is Young because we know your dad was Brigham. We hate that, but we know that you're monogamous. Right. So you're still okay. And I mean, so they're consciously doing it. There is, I don't want to say a deception.
Yeah.
But there is a deception about it. There's a conscious public-facing kind of construction that they're doing on purpose.
It reminds me of a letter that Wilford Woodruff writes one of his wives during the underground period when he knows that she's going to have to testify. And he tells her, well, tell the truth, but as little of it as necessary in the situation. So I just love this article so much, Andrea, for a number of reasons. One, it's fun. It's funny. It's fascinating. It shows, these fascinating topics. Two, it opens up questions, right? You're clear that you don't know all the answers and that history is a continuing inquiry. And three, you deliver it as the presidential address of the Mormon History Association. So I want to talk to you for just a couple minutes more because registration is open now for the June annual conference of the Mormon History Association. It's going to be in Vegas this year. You've thankfully handed off the seer stone to me that I have here overseeing our conversation.
And it's fun little box. It's fun little clippy box.
That's right. And now I have a hat that'll go with it too. So
that's
we're good. How did you become involved in the Mormon History Association, and what has that association mean to you over the years as just an over-specialized nerd in history?
So I never wanted to be a Mormon historian. I'm just going to put that out there. Like even back in graduate school, when Paul Reeve and I were at BYU together as undergraduates, we used to joke with each other, like, I'm never going to be a Mormon historian. He's like, no, that stuff's crazy. Like you get into all the controversial stuff and whatever. And I think it's funny that both of us have become Mormon historians. It kind of started in graduate school. Actually, I'm going to make a connection. I was doing a semester in Nauvoo, and I was just teaching the American history classes. I was with Ken Godfrey and a few other folks. And Ken Godfrey taught the church history stuff for the Nauvoo students. And he made this passing reference. This was prior to my entrance into my PhD program. He made this passing reference. He was talking about Zion's camp. And he said, nobody's ever written on the women of Zion's camp. And that's all he said. And then he moved on. And I wrote in my notes, no one's ever written on the women of Zion's camp. And that's where it started. So when I was in graduate school at Nebraska, I just did it as an extra thing. I didn't even do it for a class. And I did it on the side and submitted it to the MHA, which was in Ogden that year. And I presented my paper and I won the best paper award that year. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is kind of fun. Maybe I'll do it. And then I still didn't do it. I still wasn't totally engaged in it. But then once I got to BYU and then to BYU Idaho, there were just so many opportunities to do women's history through a Latter-day Saint lens that I just kept getting pulled in and pulled in and pulled in and pulled in. And once you do suffrage in the West, you can't leave out the suffrage in Utah. You can't leave it out. You can't make your own donut hole. You have to include it. So that's how it happened. And then I just, over the years, I've served in different capacities at MHA. I've presented papers. I've been on chaired sessions like a lot of us have done. I won a couple of awards along the way, that kind of thing. So, So that's how I
Ironically, my birth as a Mormon historian was also in BYU's Nauvoo program. So we'll have to reminisce that. Yeah, I was in there last semester in the winter of 2006. So, so fun times. So also, very few of the viewers of this channel are professional historians, or the people who are just mostly interested. And I'm sure you, like me, have experienced lots of people who just attend MHA because they like history. Some become armchair historians. Some write award-winning articles as an independent scholar with no institutional affiliation. And others just attend because they enjoy geeking out, right?
I agree. And I think for all of us, whether you have pioneer stock or not, which I don't, ironically, that's another thing. Like I've never felt that, like I'm also doing my family history because my parents are converts. Mine is more, I'm just interested in my group, my people. It's kind of like and maybe you feel the same way. It's like, these are my people and to do the history of our people. And as a professor, I find that teaching Latter-day Saint students that I can make so many connections that ring with them that they go, oh yeah. And then I'll ask people, do you have an ancestor who did blah, 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 blah. And they'll raise their hands. And I had an ancestor who did this. It's a wonderful way of helping them to personalize history if you can make those church history connections. Do you have an ancestor that served in the Mormon battalion? Do you have an ancestor who was a polygamist? Do you have an ancestor who did whatever? Do you have an ancestor who was in Kirtland? And I'll get like half the class and I'll say, okay, let's talk about what happened in Kirtland. So it's fun. It's fun. It's personal. It's engaging.
It's a family reunion, but it's your chosen family of fellow history enthusiasts. And even if you have no Mormon connections at all, we've already, won the battle of serving coffee at the conference. That's done now. Thankfully to labor done by many a decade or two ago. So it's just such a great and welcoming space. And you get to hear great presentations like this one. So Dr. Andrea Radke Moss, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for talking about your article. And I hope everyone's excited to go read it themselves now.
I hope so too. Thanks for having me, Ben. This was loads of fun.
It's such a truly fascinating story, a reminder that history can be surprising, fun, and provocative, and also never-ending. She emphasized to me after we turned off the recording, she hopes someone who has some dedication and interest and is looking for a project try to trace down whether this is happening with other LDS leaders, including apostles, James Talmage, Anthony Lund, even Reed Smoot. Remember the apostle who finally got a seat in the U.S. Senate because he wasn't a polygamist, was actually secretly sealed to deceased plural spouses. How common was this? This is a topic that still needs more investigation. And when you research it, or if you just want to learn more about it, the best way to do so is through the Mormon History Association. I will link to the conference registration page in the video description. It is taking place the first weekend of June in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Tuscany Resort. I'm so excited for it. We have some phenomenal pre- and post-conference tours if you want to learn on the ground. The pre-conference tours looks at Mormon settlement in the Vegas region, and the post-conference tours looks at the variety of Mormon expressions in the century since. That will include stops in Bunkerville, one of the last places of the Mormons practice the law of consecration, St. George, where you'll tour the home of Juanita Brooks, one of my true heroes and one of the founding historians of Mormonism in the mid-20th century, as well as a trip out to Short Creek to see where the fundamentalist Mormon communities lived for decades until just recent changes. We also have a number of great plenary addresses that are going to be delivered by leading scholars. The opening session of the conference is unlike any academic conference before, I would argue, because we're going to have a live showing of a documentary on a father and son Mormon professional wrestling team from the mid-20th century. We'll see the images and we'll have a live narrator as well as musicians providing the background. Tell me you've ever heard that in an academic conference. We're also, after that, going to have a panel and showing of Mormon Gothic horror movies, also to get you in the zone for the weekend. The opening plenary session is going to be delivered by Dr. Susan Johnson, the Harry Reid professor at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And she'll talk about Mormons, indigenous and Spanish and slavery in the West, grounding us in the space of the American West. The membership luncheon is going to be delivered by Dr. Elise Boxer, whose book on Mormon settler colonialism was probably my favorite book on Mormon history last year. And then the Smith Pettit lecture, the lecture that we pay a leading scholar outside of Mormon studies to come into the conference and talk about their expertise within the context of how Mormonism plays in, is going to be delivered by Dr. Catherine Jin Lum, who wrote one of the best books on American religious history recently on Heathen, which talks about race and empire and imperialism and religion in America. And she's currently working on a book on how Americans view their ancestors and purgatory in the heavens. And so she'll be talking about how Mormons fit into that broader story. I'm so stoked for it, if you can't tell already. And then hopefully not everyone will be let down when I deliver my presidential address that Saturday night, which will be based on my new research project, which is on Cleon Skousen and the origins of white Christian nationalism in America. Because in my mind, this is what I'm going to be talking about. In my mind, there are two political Skousens in the public imagination. There's the public Skousen, the political Skousen, who was involved in the John Birch Society, wrote the 5,000-year leap as a key text, and shaped so much of the political imagination. And then there's the religious Skousen, who wrote on theological, scriptural, doctrinal matters, like his famous book, The First 2,000 Years and the Third 1,000 Years, and so forth. And I'm going to argue in my presidential address that these two Cleon Skousens have to be understood together. And so I'm calling this address the 5,000 Years of Cleon Skousen, which I hope will give an insight not just on a fascinating individual who really shaped American thought in the 20th century, but also on these key tensions of religion and politics in the post-World War II era. If that's not enough to whet your appetite, I don't know what will. Please join us at the Mormon History Association conference. And even if you can't join us, please become a member of the Mormon History Association so you can get access to this groundbreaking scholarship, like Dr. Andre Radke Moss's article. And then my article next year on Cleon Skousen will appear in Journal of Mormon History. And you can also register for online streaming for the Mormon History Association conference, which again, I promise will be worth the price of admission. All right, that's a lot. Thank you for bearing with me. If you can't tell, I am so excited to geek out about these materials, and I'm so excited you're willing to listen to me on it. History has never been more relevant than it is right now, so I'm so grateful for this community, for MHA, and other venues that allow us to recognize history's centrality to the present.